How's it going, guys? I neglected to do a level 60 and 100 talents coverage in this week's video so that I could go more in depth with them in this one. If you missed that video, there's a link on your screen to go see it. Also, check the description for some super awesome, handy dandy fun stuff of usefulness. Let's get right into it, shall we? Alright, level 60 talents include Soul of the Forest, Incarnation, and Force of Nature, but we're actually going to start off with Incarnation this time around, because fuck left to right things. Incarnation is a 3-minute cooldown that buffs all of your damage, all of it, by 15%, and it lasts 30 seconds, so twice the duration of Celestial Alignment. Now, the most optimal way to use this cooldown is to stack it together with Celestial Alignment. With our new fancy 4-piece, which I'll cover in a later video, Celestial Alignment won't always be 3 minutes cooldown. Once you get it, you're probably going to want to use Incarnation with odd Celestial Alignment, since it won't be up for all of the even Celestial Alignments, so you use it on 1, 3, and 5 if you get it. Now, if you have your 4-piece, then you don't have to worry about anything just yet. You can worry about that when you get it. Now, it's best to save your Incarnation in CA for Bloodlusts, or on fights where you might not, like for example on fights where you might not use Bloodlust on pull. A huge skill cap with Incarnation is that you should save Star Surge charges for it. So you want to hover around two or so Star Surge charges before popping cooldowns. And you always want to make sure to pop cooldowns in Lunar for your Lunar empowerments. Incarnation is currently our default talent, since it adds a lot of damage to our burst, which is something that we're already good at, so why not just add more burst on top of your burst. There's not too much to talk about with Incarnation. Typically just use it with your Celestial Alignment, so we're going to move on to Soul of the Forest. So Soul of the Forest is designed very much as a single target talent. It buffs every Lunar and Solar Empowerment, the buffs that you get from casting Star Surge in either of your clips. Soul of the Forest buffs these by 15%, which is actually really good. There are two major problems with Soul of the Forest, however. It only benefits single target, since it only works when you're casting Star Surge the entire fight, and it's currently being outclassed by Incarnation. Now, a lot of that is the fight design, so let's take a look at every, quote, single target in Mythic Highmaul. Now we have Kargath, who has a damage modifier for Roar of the Crowd. It also has a cat, but who really cares about the cat? So the Roar of the Crowd is a damage modifier that you would want to stack with Incarnation and Celestial Alignment. We have Butcher, who will typically live for about 3.5 minutes to 4 minutes, so he dies right after your second set of 3s fall off, meaning right after you burst for your second time. A Korag, you want to save second set of burst cooldowns for when his shield drops so that you can actually DPS the boss instead of his stupid magic shield. And Brackenspore has the blue haste mushrooms and the big ad, so you typically want to save your second or third set of cooldowns for a blue mushroom and an ad. And Imperator has the transition phases that you may want to be saving burst cooldowns for, or you probably should be. Soul of the Forest stacks with our 2 and 4-piece very well, and it may very well be best for single target. However, there are very few bosses where you only cast Star Surge. I think that's its biggest downfall, is I get a lot of FPS lag. Ignore the FPS lag. It's because I'm not tabbed in. That's your fault. It's because I'm reading things. I don't do that often. God, I'm ranting. Alright. Finally, we have Force of Nature. Force of Nature spawns a Treant every time you cast it. It has 3 charges on a 20-second recharge time, and each Treant lasts for 15 seconds. So when summoned, they cast Wrath on your target, the one that you had selected when you casted it. Now, since they only hardcast Wrath, they're only ever useful on single target, or bursting a killing target, priority target, blah blah blah, target. So their damage is being buffed quite a bit in 6-1, but I don't feel it's going to be large enough to compete with Incarnation on multi-target fights. Now, Force of Nature is also somewhat gear dependent. Optimally, you want to only summon your treants when you have major procs, preferably Int or Haste procs. Mastery procs will do absolutely nothing for your treants. They don't snapshot, they have the same stats that you have. Likewise, with procs that build up over time, those are pretty useless for our woodland friends. Since we use the Mastery enchant on our weapon, treants don't benefit from that. They're only really going to benefit from trinket procs or your legendary ring proc. And there's only a few trinkets that are useful for them. So we'll go of those. We have Beastlord Darmok's Trinket, which is a haste proc. We have Orgorger's Trinket, which is a crit proc, and we have Copeland's Clarity, which is an on-use spell power proc. And then I guess we have Shards of Nothing too, which is a on-use haste trinket. But a 5-all. If you don't have 2 of those trinkets and a legendary ring, it'll be pretty hard to do optimal damage with Trance. Again, if your raid is having a hard time swapping to big ads on Imperator, they might be worth trying. However, if you're gonna lose a lot of damage on the transitions without Incarnation. So just to reiterate how to optimally use Force of Nature, you sit on 2 charges, you use all 3 charges on pull with your cooldowns, and then you wait, you hold on to charges as long as you can. Typically, you don't want to cap out at 3, that's bad, but so you use 1 right before you cap out on 3. And you'll use a trinket whenever you get a good proc. So whenever you get a Beastlord Darmok trinket proc, or whenever you get an Intellect Ring proc. So this means that you have to track those with weak ores or tell me when. Or you can just look up at your buffs if you're really that lazy and you can't be bothered to make a weak ore. I actually think that's all I have to say about Force of Nature. Alright, let's move on to level 100 talents. Alright. So typically, our eclipse is 20 seconds from peak to peak, and 40 seconds to go from lunar peak all the way back to lunar peak again. Just the whole bar. With Euphoria, this time is cut in half. It also buffs your cast times by 20%. These cast times are huge, considering that you could read a book with the time it takes to cast Starfire with our current haste. So let's go over the pros and cons of having our eclipse time cut in half. A pro, you can cast Starfall and Star Surge in Lunar nearly every time. On a fight like Twin Ogron, you will literally never have to use a charge in Solar. Simply Starfall every time you hit 0 energy going into Lunar, and use 1 Star Surge if you have any extras. Rinse and repeat every time you enter Lunar. Another pro, Sunfire will never fall off. If you don't have any talent, Sunfire only lasts for 24 seconds or like 32 if you refresh it. This means that it'll fall off about the time that you re-enter Solar Phase, and it'll never last until you get to Solar Peak. Of course, it's worth waiting until you hit Lunar or Solar Peak to reapply it. However, it's shitty that it falls off. But with Euphoria, it should never fall off since you'll reapply it every time you hit Solar Peak. Pro, you only have to apply Moonfire every other time you hit Lunar, so you can spend more time hardcasting. Yeah. Final pro, on AoE fights, you can Sunfall or Sunfire Cleave more often if you take the Solstice. That goes for Lunar as well, so if there's a lot of Cleave, you can be Starfalling more often. It kind of goes back to the first point. Now let's see, cons. You can't spend as much time in either eclipse dotting everything. You only have 10 globals in Lunar now, and 1 is typically spent Starfalling if you're going to be multi-dotting. And that only leaves you 9 to multi-dot Moonfire. So if there's a lot of ads, you won't have enough time to do so. Also, let's go con. If you don't have Euphoria, then you can Starfall twice in every lunar phase, where typically you only get 1 Starfall off because it's 10 seconds instead of 20. Con, our 2-piece devalues the haste buff from Euphoria. Actually, that has nothing to do with our eclipse time, but I didn't want to forget mentioning it. I can't think of any other cons, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to Stellar Flare. Only 2 talents remaining, team. We got this. All right. I can see the end of my notes. It's possible. We've done it. We're going to reach the end of this video soon. Alright, so Stellar Flare is receiving a pretty sizable buff in 6-1. I don't think this is going to change Euphoria or Balance Power being top tier talents, but who knows? Maybe it'll start topping meters on certain fights. I'm pretty sure Stellar Flare was designed to be a multi-dotting style talent, a talent that you take when you plan on cross-dotting everything in existence. You'll typically use Stellar Flare when you're about to reach 0 eclipse height. That's how you optimally use it. So let's assume it's a 1.3 second cast. Then you should be casting it 1.3 seconds before you reach the dead center of your eclipse bar. Similarly, if you are multi-dotting 3 targets, you'd want to pre-cast this at 2.6, 1.3, and 0 seconds to the center of your eclipse bar. This way, your casts will finish at plus 1.3 seconds, 0 seconds, and minus 1.3 seconds in relation to the center of your eclipse bar. That way they're all nice and even and dealt equal damage, similar, except for the stop it. I hope you put 2 and 2 together on that one, because I suck at explaining things. Stellar Flare only snapshots initial damage, similar to our other dots, so it's not a huge deal if you mess this up, because currently it only lasts 20 seconds. It's being buffed to 24 seconds, which actually does nothing for us. We actually don't care about that. It's 20 seconds from 0 eclipse all the way back to 0 eclipse, so you should never have Stellar Flare drop in the first place if you're good about it. But I guess it's like a quality of life thing, and they wanted to make it look like Sunfire lasts for 24 seconds as well, so maybe that's what they were going for. Now, as of 6.0.3, we don't use this talent for any fight. However, with the buff coming in 6.1, that's certainly subject to change, and you should check the spreadsheet again once 6.1 drops. Now, last but not least, we have Balance Power. There are 2 key parts to Balance Power. First, your hard casts extend the duration of their respective dots. Starfire extends Moonfire by 6 seconds, while Wrath extends Sunfire by 4 seconds per cast. I haven't found too much of a use for this yet. However, I think it may come in handy on like Hansgar and Franzok, since one of the bosses will just piss off for a minute or so while you're doing all your movement. So, I think I think my record Moonfire is at like 3 minutes and 10 seconds now, so if you can beat that record, good job. Now the other half to this talent is that it increases the dot damage from Moonfire and Sunfire. That's the periodic ticking damage, not the instacast damage, by 10%. Now this isn't great unless you're dotting a whole bunch of mobs, and it's even better if you're doing this with cooldowns. Now a great example of this is on Mythic Tectus. You break both of the shards on Mythic Tectus at the same time, summoning 8 motes, and then you have 2 leftover core shards remaining. So you have 10 nads in total that you need to kill. Now you'll have 3-minute cooldowns up for this, and your rage is popping Bloodlust for this, typically. So this is a great time to have Balanced Power. You hit your cooldowns, and you tab target 10 times, and you multi-dot them 10 times. So you'll do a ton of burst damage during cooldowns. Now the more mobs you hit, the more mobs you dot, the better this talent is. So the more mobs it gets better. It also is really strong when you're Sunfire cleaving with a lot of mobs. So think about that, 1 global for a buttload of superpowered Sunfires. Now watch out though, there's a lot of ads this tier that don't really need to be dotted. For instance, the little ads in the Cho'Gall phase and in phase 1 and 3 of Imperator. Those ads do not need to be dotted, they're not with the global for us. So don't waste your globals, don't think just because there's a lot of ads on a fight that Balanced Power is going to be better. Now, if you aren't quite sure which talents you should be taking for each fight, there's that fancy schmancy super duper Google spreadsheet down in the description for all of you. And there's a link too for the other half of this video. That one talks about all the other talents and glyphs, all the ones that we don't care about, the wishy-washy ones. But I think that's it for our DPS talent choices. Please like this video if you learned something, and post any questions you may have down in the comment section below. Next week's video, we'll finish up our tour of the spellbook, and we'll start talking about our rotation. Videos on the table for the near future include a gearing that also includes gems and enchants. We'll talk about our 2 and 4 piece, and we'll have a super nice, awesome, not boring or lengthy discussion on that. And raid awareness, among other things. We'll get around to everything. Now, that's subject to change, so don't take that for granted, or don't take that lightly, I guess. And of course, there's a lot more topics that I wish to cover over time. But we'll get around to those. No worries, no need to rush that. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. But until then, keep flapping, my fine feathery friends. Keep flapping.